The Central Club.
What's going on, people? Welcome to the Central Club. This episode is brought to you by Ring Aspire Printing, Weekend Defender, and Apple Camping. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the club, and hit the bell button to be notified of future content. Today, we have a really interesting, very important guest on the Central Club, a very important topic, I should say. If you remember, about a year and a half ago, we had the amazing Rachel Williams from Stand Up to Domestic Abuse to speak about the horrors that she went through in her past relationship. And since then, she was nagging away, telling me that I should get another guest on who's amazing, who is also a survivor of domestic abuse. And when she told me the name, I just couldn't believe it, because this is like a household name. Well, the face is, you know, we've all seen this face on our TVs in our lives. So I'm really excited to get into this one. I warmly welcome Ruth Dodsworth.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here. Really, really is lovely. And Rachel is absolutely awesome, I have to say. She's amazing.
Yeah, she is. She's a wild one.
Yeah, I wouldn't mess with Rachel.
Yeah, like, I often think how she went through that, because I know there's a lot of guys out there who'd be feared of it.
You know that thing, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger? If ever there's a person, that's her.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I met Rachel, bizarrely, probably about 5, nearly 6 years ago. And Rachel had won an award for services to domestic abuse. And what Rachel didn't know was, kind of a few days before I met her that first time, my now ex-husband had just been arrested for domestic abuse. So I was kind of going through all this hell. But I think Rachel was able to, no one knew about it. No one knew about it apart from one or two people. And I think Rachel was able to sense something in me that, I don't know, it was like this weird connection. So I'm there kind of all jolly japey and isn't it wonderful you've won this award? But I think she could see in me that there was something going on. And it's weird, isn't it, how, like, you know, you'd say you wouldn't have thought it would happen to someone like me. I wouldn't have thought it would happen to someone like Rachel. And that's the thing. That's what I've learned since my story went public a couple of years ago, is that domestic abuse can happen to anyone. Absolutely anyone. Doesn't matter who you are, what your job is. You can be male, female, old, young, black, white. Doesn't matter. It can happen to you.
It doesn't stereotype.
No. And I never thought, you know, God, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, finished school, university, got my degree, postgraduate. I'm relatively intelligent, worked hard all my life, nice upbringing, happy family, no childhood issues, nothing at all. And I never thought it would happen to me. I thought I was far too intelligent and far too kind of, you know, switched on to end up in a relationship that would pretty much almost cost me my life.
Yeah. Well, this is probably a bit of a deep, but also a premature question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you feel going through what you've gone through now is like, there's no regrets? Like, you're glad you've gone through it? Has it made you stronger?
It's such a weird thing. I get asked all the time, bet you wish you'd never married him. And I would never say that. I've got 2 amazing kids out of that marriage. My daughter Grace is 21, my son Jack's 19, and they are my absolute world. And make no mistake, you know, when I met Jonathan, my now ex-husband, I absolutely adored him. I loved him, thought the world of him, and that's why I stayed with him for 20 years. Didn't matter what he did to me during those 20 years. At the end of the day, he was my husband and I loved him. He was the father of my kids. So I would never say I wish I hadn't married him, but actually being married to him and surviving all of that has made me the person that I am today. And domestic abuse doesn't define me. It's not my whole story. It's part of my story.
Yeah, well, we could do a whole story. We could do a whole podcast on just how you have been so successful with your career as in TV, as a weather lady and presenter as well. You know, you've been amazing. You know, this is a great podcast anyway, but I do think that this part is what's really important and people, you know, really want to listen to, because there's so many going through it.
There are. I mean, you know, my story is, I think it's really interesting in that you might have watched me on telly for, well, I've been at ITV for 28 years. I'm that old. And I think apart from the fact that a lot of the time I probably look really thin and kind of a bit tired, no one would ever have known that, there I was living this seemingly Instagrammable, lovely lifestyle, had an amazing job, it all looked fantastic, but I was going home every single night to absolute hell. And then coming back in the next morning, plastering my makeup on, doing my hair, putting on the weather outfit, whatever, and carrying on with my day. And that's part of the whole thing with domestic abuse, is that it's so hidden. Because, do you know what, for a long time, I knew that, my life wasn't good, but I didn't really know it was domestic abuse. And so part of my survival was like, he would do what he would do, and then the next morning make me a cup of tea, and it was as if nothing had ever happened, and I'd go off to work, and that was life. That was just survival. That was coping. That was getting through each day. But I think people watching on telly, on surface value, you've got this amazing life, this amazing job that you've worked so hard for, but no one really kind of knows what goes on behind closed doors, do they? And that's part of the illusion.
Well, how many people would probably be sat there going through their ordeal, and they'll switch on the news at 6 o'clock after having a party, and think, God, I wish I had her life. It seems so simple for her.
Yeah.
Put a smile on her face.
Absolutely. She got 2 kids, what, and a husband, how amazing, she's so lucky. And do you know what? I always say this, I am lucky. I really, really am lucky. I have an amazing job. I have 2 amazing kids. But part of what's made me this person now is the other bit of my life, which was less amazing. It was frightening. It was terrifying. It was humiliating. It was degrading. But it's just a part of me. It's just a part of my story. And actually, I never wanted my story to go public. I was quite happy. You stick my name into Google and it would come up with rainbows and butterflies and fairies and sunshine and, and so when he was first arrested over 5 years ago, and he was arrested several times, and then court case, and he pleaded guilty to 2 charges. There were other charges that we did a plea deal and he dropped, and it was not nice. He was sentenced on the Wednesday. I thought I'd go back to work the next day. No one would know anything about it, and life would carry on, and I'd still be butterflies and rainbows and fairies. But the press kind of thought otherwise, and there was public interest in my story being made public, and that's what happened. And so, he was sentenced, and within 20 minutes, it was everywhere. It was on Wales Online. It was BBC. It was ITV. The media ran with it.
Well, how does, obviously we know how that works, but working for an organisation like ITV, could you ever contact them and say, look, I don't want this out, or it was just like, no, it's going out?
It was out there. It was too late. And if one organisation runs it, then everyone else runs it, and they have to. I mean, my colleagues were, because don't forget, most of my colleagues at ITV did not know what had been going on. I told 1 or 2 people, but for a lot of my colleagues, sort of suddenly there's these headlines that their colleague's ex-husband, who a lot of them knew, was going to prison. So that was a shocker. And I sent out an email after that, sort of saying, look, this isn't the way I wanted a lot of you to find out. I'd rather have had the opportunity to speak to myself, but, public interest, and I get it. And, I'm a journalist myself. If I'd been in a journalist mode and it happened to one, I'd probably have run the story too.
Good on it, yeah.
Yeah. And rightly so, because actually it is an important story, whether I like it or not, whether my family likes it or not. This is massive. It's bigger than me. It's not just about me. This is about the people who contact me on social media, email, whatever, every single day. And I kid you not, every single day since that story went public, saying, because of what you're saying, because you're talking about it, because it's in the papers, I think it's happening to me. I think it's happened to my son, my daughter, my neighbour. And yeah, that without doubt is every single day. So what I thought was just happening to me is not just happening to me at all. It is, whether we like it or not, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
What's going on, people? Really sorry to crash midway through this episode, but we've got an important announcement to make. As you know, from day one, we have been giving you exclusive content week in, week out. And we've even built 3 studios from scratch, which has been a bit of a graft, to be fair. Well, now we're asking for your help in return. We promise to give you exclusive content, behind the scenes footage, reaction videos, and documentaries if you really support us by signing up to our Patreon. The description is below. Stay central.
Yeah, it's a bizarre look what you said though there about, you know, ITV running with it and stuff. You can imagine it, can you? You know, Anchor there, they tell the story, and now to Ruth, who we just spoke about with the weather.
Yeah, I mean, you know, yes.
It never ever worked like that though, did it?
Well, even yesterday, there was a story on. I was in the studio as normal for the weather. A story on was about stalking, and you know that's one of the convictions against my ex-husband, stalking. I think you can't live your life constantly being afraid of these stories. You know, I am still Ruth, the weather person. I still am. Always have been, always will be. That stalking, yeah, again, was part of my story, but, you know, I'm okay with that. I don't hear the word stalking or coercive control, domestic abuse and suddenly melt. I don't. It just fires me on more than anything, you know?
Okay, so if we could just go back a little bit then.
Yeah.
So how did you meet Jonathan?
Okay, so I was actually filming a series about going out and about nightlife, and he happened to be one of the people I interviewed. And like so many, you know, new relationships. I mean, I was young, single, very, you know, God, way back when, and met him, and it was all just so exciting. And you know, finished film, and then he asked me out, and of course, you know, you get caught up in this like romance, don't you? And he was amazing. He was charismatic. He was handsome guy, and you know, why wouldn't I be taken up with that? And quite quickly, you know, we sort of, you know, we went out, then we sort of moved in. I moved in with him, and then within a year we were married, and then my daughter was born a year later. So it was all really fast paced and exciting, and kind of like so many new relationships. You just want to make it work, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, people always say to me, oh, you know, when did you first recognize the signs? When did you first realize that perhaps he wasn't like that? And at the time, you know, I think almost the first day I saw him having an argument with his mum and his sister, and he was swearing at them, and you know, you kind of think, okay, yeah, so he's got a bit of a temper, but he never used that on me. And actually, he did kind of use it on me almost very early on. But you know, when you're in a relationship and you want to make it work, and then you've told everybody about this relationship, and the world knows, and your family knows, you forgive all of that.
Yeah, you don't want to go backwards.
No. And you know, kind of a bit of jealousy and possessiveness is actually quite flattering. You know, let's say, oh, he must really love me. He doesn't want me to talk to that other guy because, you know, I'm his and he loves me, and it's, you know, it is all a little bit flattering, but actually it doesn't stay flattering for very long, and it kind of gets quite sinister. And you don't really realize it. Suddenly, I don't want you talking to that person becomes you're not talking to that person and their mates. You're not going out. You're not, unless I'm with you. It kind of snowballs quite quickly, and you don't really realize it. And then within a few years, you know, you're married, and then you realize that you're losing contact with a lot of your friends, with your family, because he doesn't want you speaking to these people. Contacts were sort of disappearing from my phone, because I think his mindset was I was his alone, wasn't allowed to speak to certain blokes, certain mates of his. Everyone that I came into contact, I think, to his mindset was like a potential, oh God, she likes them more than she likes me, you know, a potential affair. And that was kind of how he thought of things. And I think in a previous relationship of his had ended with him finding that his girlfriend was having an affair. And so I very much paid the consequences of that. I paid for that throughout our whole marriage.
I think that's common in relationships on both sides, I'd say.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's what happened with Rachel. I think with Rachel's partner, he was left and kind of.
So I think that becomes part of their. It's not a reason for their behaviour. Maybe it is.
It's not validation. It's not.
No, I wasn't having affairs. I mean, I remember, you know, I was at home once and the window cleaner was there, and I came out in the bathroom and I got a towel on, and Jonathan went absolutely ballistic with me because I didn't know the window cleaner was there. But to his mind, I'm his wife. I shouldn't be showing myself to a
window cleaner was there. Drop your towel.
And so a guy used to work for him, you know, a bouncer in his nightclub. He thought I was having an affair with him because I happened to be in the same room as this. You know, it's. Looking back, I mean, I used to think he was joking when he was accusing me of these things. And it was like, are you serious? What? Because I was in the same room as somebody. You think I'm... And actually, you know, I would sort of laugh it off, but it was really quite... Looking back at it now, he meant it. He absolutely meant. He thought I was genuinely doing these things, and I wasn't.
Well, if that's the case, it's torture. It's
It
torture
is.
for him and you. Like,
Yeah.
why would you be in a relationship where you
Yeah.
think your wife is cheating on you all
Yeah.
the time?
It, I get it from both sides. It was really hard. And actually, the more you say, no, I'm not, that sometimes the guiltier you sound, don't you? The more you protest your innocence. But I could never understand that mindset of his. That's the last thing I was doing. I was married. I got 2 young kids. I certainly was. I didn't have the energy, quite frankly. And I used to find it really frustrating. But actually, the longer we were married, and what started off as just a bit of an accusation then became far more sinister, because he would use that against me every opportunity. If I was home 5 minutes late, it's big. Well, it must have been because I was with someone else, or so very quickly that then becomes like a stick to beat you with in
But
many ways.
so in years, how quick was that change from this is amazing to, oh my God, I am literally with someone who's
Yeah, a couple of years, I would say. I mean, hand on heart, almost maybe, from day one. I always knew he had a temper. I always knew that. I never thought he'd use it on me, but quite quickly he did. And it starts off as verbal, as shouting, and I think the problem with it was, as is so common, was that I never knew when it was coming. If you met him now, you would say, oh, what an amazing guy. Life and soul, lovely, happy, outgoing. And he was. And I loved him for that. And that's part of the reason I stayed with him. But what happened was that the balance tipped, and those nice moments got fewer and fewer, and the nasty side of him sort of started to win the battle in a sense. But no one in my family's ever got divorced, and I've got 2 kids. And how is about this for logic? I didn't want my kids to come from a broken home, so I thought staying with him was sort of the better option. He was their dad. Plus also I didn't know how to leave, I didn't have the kind of means to do that. So I stayed. But I did love him. I really did love him throughout, all the way through our marriage. And I thought I could change him. I thought, oh, because it was always like, I won't do it again. And of course you believe that, because you have to believe it, don't you? You want that person that you married to be that person. But it's like the dream marriage that you thought you had. It's just all an illusion. And it's quite frightening.
Was there ever times where like he did improve, or was it just
Oh yeah, and so you kid yourself then, thinking, oh well, he won't do it again. That's it. Now he's turned a corner. He's Mr. Nice Guy again.
Yeah.
But it would never last.
Yeah.
It would never last.
Have your kids had any relationship with him?
No, since he was arrested 5 years ago, we've basically got a lifetime restraining order, me and the kids. So there's no contact. But I think that probably shows the level of what we were going through. Courts don't issue lifetime restraining orders.
Yeah, how do
unless
they
there's a
feel about
reason.
that?
I mean, I've always said to them, look, at the moment, I think it's the right thing to do. At the end of the day, though, he's their dad. My kids witnessed more than any child should have to. They, you think you're shielding your children. They can't, when he's shouting at you, they can't hear. They heard everything. They saw everything. My son was my physical protector. He had to wrestle his father off me. So my kids are very aware of what he was like. He was very manipulative. He would, he'd offer to pay them to go through my phone. He would, get my kids to kind of spy on me. So my kids are very aware. So actually, at the moment, I don't think
He would pay.
Yeah. Well, he was so convinced that if I was late, then there was a reason for that. So yeah, he would pay me. He wanted to pay my son to go through my phone. Bearing in mind he had access to all my phone, my emails, my text messages. That's part of the sort of the controlling behaviour in a sense.
Yeah, what
Absolutely
were the
not.
rules in the household? Would you say like?
I mean, I don't know if they were rules. It was just the way that we lived. He had control of everything. He'd have my phone, go through my phone, my work emails, everything. He'd turn up to work. He would drive me to work, pick me up. Sort of had all my salary went into a bank account that I ultimately didn't have access to. So I'd have to ask him for money. If I was going away filming, unless he'd come with me, or when I got there, I'd have to FaceTime him so that he could see where I was.
He'd come with you to work.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But that was my life, and that's how I lived it, and I didn't really know otherwise. And, you know, people will say, why did you stay? Why didn't you just pack a bag and go? Well, when you haven't got, first of all, when you haven't got the money,
Yeah.
you know, because he controlled every penny when no one else knows about it. So I hadn't told friends or family. Packing it, how are you going to do that? How are you going to pack a bag, get two kids, disrupt their lives, change everything, possibly make the situation worse? You know.
Well, this is why I think, a part of this, what I say about like keeping your personal life and your professional separate in terms of this is what's going on at home, but you'll never think that in a workplace. Was that because he was taking you a lot of times, and when he was in the public, he was actually a really nice
Yeah.
man?
Oh, absolutely. You know, for a lot of my colleagues, it was like, oh, he's a lovely guy. Come in. You know. And but that's who they are, isn't it? It's like that Jekyll and Hyde thing, and part of the reason, like I said, I stayed with him for so long because the nice bits were really nice, but you never knew when the temper would happen, when the change was going to happen, how long it would last for. You know, he could be lovely, 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 get home from work, fabulous, one phone call, and that was it. He was Mr. Nasty, and I never knew when that was coming, and I never knew when it was going to end. And when you live your life like that, constantly in fear, walking on eggshells, trying to keep the peace, trying not to upset him to get into an argument, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I lived like that for 20 years.
So he was like quite well, at the time he was quite successful. Then he had businesses, nightclubs, Escape.
Yeah, he did.
In the past.
So he was, he was his own person. But then I think, as well as a number of other things, family issues, not my family, the recession happened. So the business kind of started to like so many other people, started to struggle financially. So I became the breadwinner.
Yeah.
So that kind of changed the dynamic in our relationship. He went from being the breadwinner to suddenly me, and actually my career at the time was doing okay. I was doing really well. People knew me. And I think that for him must have been hard. Suddenly, his wife is doing better than he is.
Well, yeah, like one of the things that, I've even experienced it in weird ways where like, I can only imagine what it's like for you. It's normally the male, if someone's famous or someone's known and they're like, oh, it's fearful that they might leave you for someone else. It is, Ed. He must have been dreading it. He's like, oh my gosh.
Wherever you go, people know you. Oh, it's Ruth off the telly. And that, I guess for him, that must have been a really hard thing. But then he married me knowing that.
Yeah.
He knew who I was.
Yeah.
He knew my job and those, unfortunately, the bits that sort of come with it. So, but I still, there was a lot going on. You could say our marriage was not conventional in that sense. Yeah. But, there's still a line, isn't there, where you don't behave the way like that he did.
So when did it get to a stage where like friends, family, colleagues started to notice?
I would say, I hid it for a long time because that's survival. Because you don't, in a weird way, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want anyone else to know because that's like admitting that kind of this life is a complete lie.
Yeah.
And actually, survival is very much kind of just almost like fooling yourself into thinking that everything's okay. And then I think probably in the last year or so of our marriage, his behavior deteriorated so much to a point where I couldn't really hide it. He was turning up at work. He was sort of coming with me. He was following me. Like my colleagues would ring my phone and he would answer. So I think people started to notice, and actually my physical health was beginning to suffer because when you live like that, it does take a toll. I think I weighed something like 6 stone at one point. My hair was falling out. I wasn't engaged. I wasn't kind of the bubbly person that I think people wanted me to be. And I have a colleague actually, and she did ask me, she said, things at home okay? And I hated her for doing that because I didn't want anyone else meddling in my, it's a really difficult thing to do. I wasn't ready to admit to anyone that things weren't right. I wouldn't admit it to myself, let alone to a colleague. And that colleague, she says to me now, and since it all went public, she sort of says she lives with the guilt that she knew something wasn't right, but she didn't act on it. She didn't do any more. But I didn't want her to. Yeah. So it's not her fault at all. I wasn't ready for her help.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
It's a really awkward
Stay out of my fucking business type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. How dare you question my lovely life and my marriage? And,
Did you get back and say anything to him or no?
I can't remember. No, because the minute you do that then starts an argument,
Okay.
doesn't it? So no, you so it's like living so many
Some
separate
are
lives.
so indoctrinated, though, aren't they? That they go, "Oh, so and so was just talking about us," as if
Yeah. Plus, he would then have had a go at that
Yeah.
person. So no, I didn't.
Did you fear for your life at all?
Always. Yeah, in the last few years, a lot of the time. I mean, his kind of take on it is no one else will ever love you as much as I do, and if I can't have you, no one else can. Because I had said a couple of times in the sort of the final few years, I couldn't live like that. I wanted a divorce. Not that I ever acted on it because I couldn't, but I was frightened a lot of the time. I'm frightened of him now. You know, it nearly cost me my life on several occasions. And when he was in a blind rage, and you know, when your husband is holding you up against the wall, when your husband breaks your ribs, when your husband behaves like that, this is the person who's supposed to keep you safe and make you feel loved in your home. And when that's happening in your home and that person is doing that to you, that's really difficult.
Yeah, the breaking the ribs and that. Can you talk us through what happened there?
Yeah, he pushed me over. But that was nothing. You know, that happened quite a lot. So,
Did he ever hit you physically, like punch you?
no, because that's visible. No, so it was usually his usual thing would be to grab me around the neck, a lot of pushing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are things that aren't public, and I can't talk about and don't want to talk about. I mean, it's it's a struggle now. I'm a strong person, but revisiting a lot of that is tough. It is tough. But yeah, he hurt me a lot, and I think the night the headline the press use was "Don't come home, Mum. He's going to kill you." That was a line from a witness statement I made to the police because he went on a 24-hour bender. I'd gone to work, and then I don't know, he'd started drinking or taking drugs. I don't know. But I'd done my final weather forecast in studio at 6:00 that Thursday evening. During the course of that day, he must have phoned me several hundred times, text messages. My kids had to hide the car keys because he was going to drive in. And I told a friend of mine about this, and that friend of mine had basically said, "I'm not letting you go home. You can't go home to that." The kids, I was in constant conversation with the kids, and they were saying, "Mum, he's going to kill you. Do not come home." So I didn't. And that's when I had to ring the police. And that's when everything changed, when I had to ring 999.
What was the cause of that? Was it like an argument before that?
No, it was just, and that's the thing, isn't it? That unpredictability. I don't know what set him off that particular day. It could have been anything. It could have been a phone call from someone. I do not know.
Yeah. Well, you said, so this was the time you phoned the police to...
Yeah.
So we've spoken off camera, so you said about how your now husband, Rob...
Yeah.
You was friends for a long...
He's the one person, actually, I'd been speaking to over the years. He was just a friend, but he happened to be a police officer. And he was the one sort of saying to me, "Oh, my God, Ruth, that's not right. You can't go home to that. And you cannot." And then that particular day, he is the one who said to me, "Do not go home. Listen to what your children are saying. Do not go home." And I think he was with me, actually. He drove down from North Wales. And I got Jonathan on speakerphone, and he was ranting and this, that, and the other. And between us, I think it was Rob who basically said, "Look, if you do not ring the police right now, I will, because he will kill you. You cannot go home to that." Kids were okay. I knew the kids were fine. Jonathan never hurt the kids. And my mum and dad were around the corner, so they knew they could get out and just go to my parents' house. But I think it sounds like a weird thing. I don't actually know what I was ringing the police for. I just knew I couldn't go back to that. I was terrified of him. I ain't got any clothes. I mean, I'd literally left the house that morning. I got the clothes I left in. I got no contact lenses. So I needed to get back home at some point. And I just wanted the police to be there so that Jonathan couldn't do anything to me. That's why I rang them. But when the police turned up the next morning, I met the police there at the house, and they arrested Jonathan straight away. I mean, he was they could see that he was absolutely dangerous. He was like a volcano, basically.
Did he get bailed? Did he get bailed from that? Right?
He got bailed. He was arrested several times, actually, over several months. Yeah, he was bailed the first time, and whilst he was on bail, he'd been driving my car, but I needed it because obviously I had kids, and he put a tracker on the car and was kind of turning up in place. He was following me, and And so he was arrested again and charged with stalking and harassment. So yeah, it sort of, he got worse basically whilst he was on bail. He got worse because he was angry. He was really, really angry that I got the police involved and that I dared to leave him. So this is the problem, you know, and this is why a lot of people don't necessarily ring the police, because actually that can make it worse.
Worse, yeah.
It makes an already angry person even angrier. How dare you? You know.
So, in terms of, like you said, so there was the stalking. You said it was more like the abuse would be invisible. So it was like stuff that he would try not to.
Yeah. So it's class. So domestic abuse, and as part of that was coercive controlling behaviour, and that's kind of the unseen bit. That's the control. That's the sort of the no one else can have you. You're mine. You're my possession. So you can't speak to anyone else. You can't have money. You're absolutely in my control every which way. You know, if I went to sleep, he'd wake me up. He'd wake me up by slapping me across the face. If I went to sleep before him, you know, little things like that are
If
all.
you went to sleep before him,
Yeah.
would he? What was he like? Would he like? If, for example, if you're in bed, would he want to have sex with you? And if you refuse, would like, is that why?
Oh, that was that. I mean, you know, in the end of our marriage, I was so terrified of him. There was nothing. Just didn't want to go anywhere near him.
Yeah.
Being Wales's biggest podcast means only one thing. We need to be sponsored by Wales's biggest clothing brand, Weekend Offender. They've been in the game for well over a decade now, and they still hold weight within the casual scene. If you want a deal on the hottest seasonal drops, then hit the discount code below at Stay Central.
Yeah, so part of the control was every aspect of your life, you know, even like going to sleep. If I went to sleep before him, he'd sort of slap my face to wake me up. There was one night where I was asleep and I woke up and I caught him. He got my thumb on my phone. He was trying to use my thumbprint to get into my phone. So, you know, even going to sleep kind of wasn't a rest from it. Literally every aspect of my life 24/7 was in his control.
Would you wake up the same time in the mornings?
Wake up in the morning, and then I think there was always that you'd lie there waiting for him to wake up, kind of thinking, right, when he wakes up, what's he going to be like? And I would say most of the time he would be, do you want a cup of tea? It was like nothing had ever happened. And actually that was the best way, because I knew then I could just like carry on with the day. Because I think denial is a massive part of it. It's pretense, isn't it? If you could go make a cup of tea, then that was okay, because that wasn't an argument. And then you could go and have a shower. I mean, if I went to the shower, toilet, bathroom, everything, he'd follow me. He'd stand there. He used to take photographs of me, and the police went through his phone and his laptop, and they just found hundreds of photographs, and most of which I didn't know he'd taken.
Is he obsessed?
Absolute obsession.
It's love as well.
But that's what he thought was love. He thought, you know, I'd say to him, why do you want to photograph? The times when I did see him taking pictures, I'd say, why do you want to photograph me brushing my teeth? Oh, because you're my wife. And that was his answer to everything. You're my wife. But what he's saying is, you're mine. You're my possession. It's not love. He thought it was love, but that's absolute ownership, isn't it? Of every aspect of my life.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot found on his phone, and yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, in terms of getting him arrested, how did you feel about that? Was you
awful? I knew the minute I dialed 999 that nothing was ever going to be the same again. You know, what were the kids going to think if I did dial that? You know, were social services going to get involved? I was terrified I was going to lose my kids. If the police and so on found out what was going on, you know, there's no way they, you know, I think the thing is, you just don't know. I didn't know what the police could do. I didn't know what he was going to be, that he would be arrested. Didn't know he was going to be charged. The whole court case thing. I mean, I've had a couple of speeding fines in my time, but you know, nothing. I've not come across the legal system.
How was that for you?
Awful, really awful. And I can so when people say I couldn't go through with it, you so see why cases fall apart because witnesses. It's terrifying. I mean, you have to make witness statements to police. You have to go over and over your story to complete strangers. And just reliving those worst, most degrading, humiliating, base moments of your life.
What was the defence like? Was you cross-examined or?
It went to court, Cardiff Crown Court, and I think the jury was sworn in on the Monday. It was slated for like 3 weeks, and on the Tuesday, I didn't have to go until the Tuesday, and actually it was back during COVID times, so I wasn't there. There was sort of a courtroom with a jury and a judge, and I was able to give a witness. I was able to be in a sort of separate room because I couldn't be in the room with him. Even now I can't look at his face, I can't hear his voice, and that's 5 years on. So this is going to sound brilliant, job that I do. There was a technical problem, and they couldn't get me. I was in this little room by myself, and they couldn't actually get the screen working so that the court could see I was there. So for about 5 hours, I was sitting in this room by myself. I wasn't allowed to speak to anybody. There was no one with me, and I had a cup of tea or anything. I was more upset about that. You're literally just sitting there. It's like dead man walking. You're just contemplating your own fate, thinking, what am I going to say? What's he going to say? What stories is he going to come up with? What's his defense going to be? And anyway, bizarrely, they got the system working, and my face must have flashed up in the courtroom. And I think it was at that moment when he saw my face, he realised I was going to go through with it. I think up to that point, he thought, nah, she's going to back out.
It's not going
to happen. He saw me there, and within a few minutes, his defence came in with a plea deal. And if he pleaded guilty to 2 charges, coercive controlling behaviour and stalking, and if I dropped several other charges, would I take the deal? And I couldn't speak to anybody about it.
You had to make the deal
had to make the deal there and then.
I bet you've spoken to people now who thought,
oh my God. Well, I think in that moment, I didn't want to go through a trial. Yeah. I was terrified of it. I didn't want my mum and dad to have to go through a trial.
When he relied on that, though, that's what you've got to realise. Half of the stuff he's done, she was relying on knowing that you'd go on any of that stuff.
I was terrified. So in that moment, I was like, you know what? I'll take it. And I did. Here I am a few years later. If you ask me would I have done the same again, I might give you a different answer. I might. Now.
Would you say the other charges that you dropped were more severe or more?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all relative, isn't it?
They should have been.
I think now I would be strong enough now, shall we say?
To say, no, I'm not taking a deal.
No, let's go through it.
Yeah.
But, that's a few years down the line, and, talking to a lot of people, therapy, processing, surviving. So I'm stronger now than I was.
So the courts, correct me if I'm wrong, but they called him an unrepentant bully.
They did, yeah, the judge. That was part of the judge's summing up.
Passive bully.
Yeah, no remorse.
And how did you cope with the aftermath? How did you cope with that?
Well, for me, the aftermath was probably slightly different to other people in that the media got wind of the story and it just went everywhere. And suddenly, at the end of the day, they print the story. I mean, a lot of people might not know how this works. It goes to a sort of there were journalists in court, and one of them messaged me to say, you do know we're going to run this. And whether I talked to them or not, they were going to run it. And I did. So in that moment, you're then in a situation where, for a few days, I just hid. I couldn't do anything, let them run their stories. And then you had this bizarre situation where you got like the Mail and the Sun and then all these tabloids kind of like, we'll give you this money, this money, which I wish I'd taken, didn't. But,
Was it like good money as well?
Yeah. Bearing in mind, I left with nothing. My house, car, everything gone because he was a gambler. He was, he'd taken out loans in my name. There were massive debts that I knew nothing about.
Well,
so everything went.
Yeah, so in terms of your salary, what you're working, he was just spending it all, was he?
It was all going, yeah.
It's crazy.
I didn't have a penny of it. If I wanted money for lunch, I had to ask.
Oh my gosh.
How ridiculous does that sound now as a grown woman with a career? So I've got, I've worked for, like I said, 28 years. I've got nothing to show for it. I've got no asset. The only asset I've got is my pension. No savings. House has gone. My credit rating was absolutely destroyed because there were things in my name I didn't know about, which I'm, by the way, still having to pay back. Because the banks and financial, they don't care that I didn't know about it. They just want their money back. Even
That's disgusting.
Even things like council tax in our house that he hadn't paid, I've had to pay back. So yeah, it's been
Surely there's no aid there for them to write those things on.
things are changing a little bit now, and there are financial institutions are recognizing that financial abuse is part of domestic abuse. But 5 years ago there was no, and then of course. So I've got my salary, I've got 2 kids, but I've got, I'm lucky in that I've got a wage, I could afford rent, but because my credit rating was destroyed, my elderly parents had to be guarantors so that I could get a place to rent. I had to basically beg HSBC to give me a bank account because no one wants to give you a bank account because of your credit rating. It's been really tough. And so, moving on is not as simple as, off to go and start new, but I am really lucky in that I can pay rent and I can put food on the table and I can afford to look after my kids, but it has been difficult.
Yeah, well, I assume if you won't be wanting to retire anytime soon, so you're willing to
I'm going to be that elderly weather presenter probably for another 20-30 years. I can't afford to retire. My daughter's going through university, and I would like to give them so much more than I'm able to. I really would, and that does bother me.
Like coast and country and stuff. Is that since that has happened?
No. I've been doing that for about 11 years. So I was, coast and country. I'd go off filming, and of course, those were the shoots where he'd come with me. Yeah, because he didn't know where I was going, and if I was out of sight, he couldn't.
Oh, probably having an affair with.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
The other fella on the.
Not.
Yeah.
It's
It's mad, isn't it?
It is, but to us, because we don't think that way, it sounds so ridiculous.
Yeah, but I get.
And I told him it was ridiculous. But the more you say to someone who thinks that way, you're being ridiculous, the more that fires him up, and that then starts an argument. So you can't win.
So is there any other things you might looking to do in terms of like TV, or are you just happy with what you're doing?
I'm lucky in that I work in telly anyway. So I've got that side of my life. But I get asked to do Loose Women. I get asked to do news items. I get asked a lot because I've kind of got a bit of a voice that I'm happy to use. Not happy, but I'm willing to use for people who haven't got that. And I mean, look, I get a lot of time, oh God, she's still banging on about this. He's done his time, let him be. Everyone deserves a second chance. So just for the record, I would like to say, I'm not vindictive. I've never set out to kind of get payback against him. It's not about that. Yes, he served his time, and everyone does deserve a second chance. He deserves a second chance, and I'd love to think that he would go on and be a better person. However, me and my kids and my family are still serving our time. My sentence will continue. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. Is he out there? I still live in fear. I'm more frightened of him now that he's come out of prison and he's angry perhaps than I ever was. So I will always feel like that. I will bang on about it until domestic abuse doesn't happen to anyone else. And if I could show you the messages that I get from people who support me saying, because you're talking about it, you've saved me. So that's what makes all of this worthwhile and worth doing. And I don't like talking about it. I really don't. No one wants to sit here and have these conversations. It's horrible. It's yucky.
Then you're not doing this for any,
no,
like you
I
said,
get no gain.
You've got a great career.
Yeah.
What are you gaining from this apart from support? Helping others.
One person can learn from, in a sense, from my mistakes, my story, my situation, then it's worth it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be this person, but I've got to be. I didn't want to have to sit here and, it's lovely talking to you, but I didn't want to have to sit here and do that. But I got to.
Well, like I said, I'd rather talk about how you got into, how do you become a weather lady, but
learn to tell a story. So
that was the question I was going to kind of ask, is like, what made you want to become an advocate? But I think you've answered that yourself.
Listen, like I said, there are. In fact, one of the kind of the comments I get is that there's always two sides to every story, and we haven't heard his side of the story. And my side of the story is this: And I'm speaking for people like myself who've been through it.
And just for the record, have you heard his side? Have you heard why he has been this way? Has he give you an example? We did say before, didn't we, about like he had this conspiracy of like he thinks I was, seeing
It was a
Rob,
setup.
and it was a set. Yeah, do you want
I mean, his side, I haven't seen him, spoken to him, heard his voice for over 5 years on that day that he was first arrested. His side of the story I've got from his from his statements from probation, from witness protection, that, I was his wife. I mean, that's on the body cam footage when he was arrested. Why are you doing this? Why? Because she's my wife. I don't think there's any remorse. I'd love a sorry, but that's never going to happen because to his mind, it's still my fault. He's in the right. He's never done anything wrong. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? I want my kids to be okay. That's my lasting legacy, is that my kids, I'll fight absolutely to make sure my kids have a happy life, are good people, will be able to sort of move on from this, and it won't define them in the way that it doesn't define me.
How can friends and family see the signs of someone dealing with domestic abuse?
It's really difficult. But if something in your gut is telling you that something's not right with somebody, ask. Be very careful how you ask. Don't forget, if you're sending a text message saying, "Are you okay?" that other person might see it. So if someone had done that to me and sent me a message saying, "Are you okay?" he would have seen it. So just be very careful. If it's just a conversation in passing, be interested. Keep an eye out. And if it's happening to you, same token, and you don't know where to start or where to go, or kind of whether speaking up or asking for help is the right thing, all I would say is absolutely it is. Because if I'd gone home that night, I would have died. There's no doubt about it. I would not be here. And domestic abuse might start off as just a bit of an argument. It might start off as just sort of, the lower end of the scale, as I call it, but it only ever goes one way. And ultimately, it could cost you your life as well. So even if you think that it's happening to you, there's help out there. There is help.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
We do ask our guests to do one more thing. If they will look down to the camera at the people and leave them with a positive message, I'm assuming relating to this. Take it away.
Okay. It's a difficult one, this, because let's face it, domestic abuse is horrible and it costs lives. And if it's happening to you or someone that you know and you're thinking, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Speaking up, getting out of this relationship. I would say to you, look at me. I didn't think domestic abuse would happen to me, but it did. And I lived with it for 20 years and it very nearly cost me my life. But because I made that decision, I got help. I got out of that relationship. I'm alive. I am well, and I am living a really, really, really lovely life. Make no mistake, it doesn't go away completely. It will always be part of me, and I will spend the rest of my life processing and dealing. But do you know what? I have a life. And everyone deserves that happy ending, and so do you.
Ruth, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything in the future.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're helping loads of people doing this, so keep doing what you're doing.
I will.
Hope you enjoyed this, guys. If you want to leave us a comment, tell us your thoughts. If any of you are going through the same thing, look at the helpline numbers down below in the comment section. Go and follow Ruth. I'm sure she takes emails still. And until next time, stay central.
The Central Club.